All right. Howdy. Thank you very much for attending. If you're having any problems hearing me, please mention something into the Q&A and I'll try to address the problem. My name is Jacob and I am a marketing coordinator here at Eagle Point Funding. And I'm excited to tell you about us and some of these opportunities relevant to your companies. So a bit about us. We are a division of the FreeMind Group, which is a grant writing firm that was started in Israel over 20 years ago to find federal contracts for startup companies. And they gradually moved to Europe and then moved to the United States with Eagle Point Funding. And since our inception in '99, we've won over $1.5 billion in awards. We have hundreds of active clients, and we specialize in R&D and do everything in-house. Now, Eagle Point, if it was unclear, works entirely with technology entities. We do nothing regarding life sciences, as this is managed by our partner company, the FreeMind Group. So if you have a life sciences technology and you're afraid you may not be able to work with us, we are happy to refer you to them, and they are able to consult you on these things. So without further ado, I'd like to get into the presentation. First, I'll give you an introduction to the federal funding ecosystem and some of the opportunities available in the upcoming third quarter. And then I'll open the floor for questions. So I'm very excited to get going. So first, just an overview of the federal budget for 2020. The R&D budget was $161.5 billion. Now, this budget has actually been increased a bit with some of the stimulus packages that have come in. But before that, the budget was $161 billion. And $60 billion of this was allocated specifically to funding research and development in private entities, such as small businesses or research projects in larger businesses. And when we say this funding is non-dilutive, that means it's very different from, say, being invested in by a venture capital or an angel, or taking a loan, because there's no transfer of equity, intellectual property, and there's no interference of power. When you win a grant or a contract from the federal government, that money is yours. And this is why we call it non-dilutive. It doesn't influence the management of your company in any way. Now, the federal government invests into four main areas: defense, cyber, energy, and advanced materials. And these investments are made by all of the agencies you can see here. So there's the Department of Transportation, Department of Defense, National Science Foundation, Institute of Science and Technology. You can see for yourself, but under these four areas, there are hundreds of topics that the federal government has an interest in. So if you see what your company does on either sides of the screens, you should definitely be perking up, because this means there is a certain federal interest in the technology that you're developing. Maybe not exactly what you're developing, but in that field. So federal funding has actually been able to support many of the technologies that we all use, or at least are familiar with. A lot of these companies, all of these companies got their starts with federal funding, as well as some of the technologies we use day to day, such as the internet, GPS, and even Siri. That one always cracks me up. So when we talk about federal investments, there's basically two reasons the government wants to make these investments into private research and development. The first is because they're seeking solutions to agency challenges. These federal agencies have technological needs, and they like to fill them by working with private companies. So how does this work? An agency will seek solutions to their challenges, and they want to know what the technology is that's out there that they could rely on to solve those problems. So they post an opportunity for R&D funding. For example, let's say they want to develop a chatbot to help the public deal with the coronavirus and answer questions of the public in federal agency websites. This is a real topic. So they post funding opportunities saying, we're looking for research and development into natural language processing, artificial intelligence, and chatbot technology. They see what's out there by seeing what companies respond to those opportunities. And from there, the federal government will make an initial investment into that technology. And in an SBIR, we call this a phase one. And this is to see how you perform. So that may be $50,000 for you to find a relevant stakeholder or to perform certain experiments or develop proof of concept. And from there, they invite those winners to apply for the second phase of development. And this allows you to demonstrate the efficacy of your technology to the government and perhaps become a supplier of a service or a product. So the second reason the government makes these investments is to invest seed money for the private industry. And this has reasons that are both altruistic and self-serving. So the federal government obviously wants to improve the quality of life for US citizens, advance technology in our country, advance job creation in our country. These were largely the reasons for creation for the America's Sea Fund. And on the other hand, of course, they're not only seeking agency challenges, but a strong economy is a strong country. Strong businesses pay a lot of taxes. In fact, they found that for every dollar invested in federal R&D, $2.30 are made back in tax. So it's not only to serve their own purposes, but also to build our country and our economy. And another example of how these grants are used sort of outside the financial benefit of them is what it indicates when a company works with a federal government. So the Milken Institute performed a study and found that companies that had investments in R&D by the federal government saw an 8 times return, over an 8-time return on that investment 8 years down the road. Now, the reason a lot of companies value this kind of investment is not only because some of the investments can be very significant, especially if you bring on the federal government as a client, but it's because a lot of these funding programs, especially the SBIRs, are designed to bring projects from proof of concept to commercialization. This is largely to help the federal government adopt technology, advanced technology early, but this shows investors that your technology has gone through a process of development that's understood and that's secure. So I mentioned SBIRs, and this is one of the most common and most popular federal funding mechanisms that are out there. But what a lot of people don't realize is that SBIRs are actually actually a very small slice of the federal funding pie. Small business innovation research grants make up only about 3% of that $160 billion we mentioned earlier. A much smaller percent is small business technology transfers, which are more for academics, and 96% of them are actually in the form of broad agency announcements. So an SBIR, like I said, kind of falls into this phased funding. It's $3.5 billion annually. And the first phase is typically that proof of concept where they want to see what the technology you're developing or the idea you're developing is. Second phase tends to be a much higher reward for them to see the prototype of your technology. And the third phase of commercialization is basically limitless in terms of the amount of funding you can win and what the potential to work with the government is thereafter. Hello, thank you for joining us. I'm just giving a quick overview of the federal funding ecosystem, and I'm describing differences between 2 of the main funding mechanisms we work with. Small Business Innovation Research Grants, or SBIRs, which are designed to bring a product from a proof of concept to a prototype to commercialization, and broad agency announcements, which make up a much more significant amount of funding. But as you'll see, they are designed, instead of being in phase, to fund research projects over a longer period of time, 2 to 5 years. The award ceilings are much higher. For example, the highest BAA award we've won is $65 million. And instead of focusing on specific topics such as SBIRs, which can also be open, they tend to be much more broad and say, well, we're applying for, or we're looking for, say, naval navigation technologies, and that grant will be open for 5 years for applications, just as an example of a broad agency announcement. So when it comes to the funding you get from federal research and development grants, these can be used to fund the salaries of your staff, subcontractors, instruments and materials, F&A costs, as well as advisors. And these all are specifically divided by the grant, but usually account for somewhere between a 5 to 7% margin for profit as well. or for discretionary spending. So now I'd like to get into some of the topics that are going to be available for the third quarter of 2020, starting with talking about the Department of Defense's SBIR program. So this would be one. I'll also talk about AFWERX, Army and Navy programs as well. So the Department of Defense's SBIR program funds over almost 150 topics with 12 offices, including the Army, Navy, USOCOM, and Air Force. The phase 1 tends to be between $50,000 and $250,000, and phase 2 is between $100,000 and $5 million. Now, $5 million is a uniquely high award for phase 2. This is a very unique opportunity to secure a very significant amount of funding for proof of concept, and the applications are going to be due July 3rd. So we're still willing to open and work with companies and consult on this opportunity. Some of the focus areas for the Department of Defense's SBIR are 5G, AI and machine learning, autonomy, space, cybersecurity, directed energy, hypersonics, microelectronics, quantum science, command control communications, nuclear, and general warfighting requirements, which are, general warfighting is kind of an open category relative to the rest, considering its own topics of interest. And I'm sorry for scrolling through kind of fast on these slides, but you'll all get a copy of the presentation and a link to the recording so you can see through in more detail once we finish. And of course, I'm happy to go back and answer any questions at the end during our session. So I'll give you an example of a Department of Defense topic. One topic opened by the Navy was for a small space, weight, and power multi-level security cross-domain solution. This was basically a cybersecurity opportunity to work with the Navy and bring your concept through an SBIR development phase. They were also looking, for example, for voice recognition software to support access across platform situational awareness and decision-making. One from the Army was a multi-solution precision location determination system to be operated by GPS, denied environment for static, dynamic, and autonomous systems or test. Another example of an Army topic was the polarimetric modeling and visualization. This was designed to develop models and visualization tools for multimodal polarimetric imagery, enhancing detection, recognition, and identification. The Air Force has really focused its efforts around COVID-19. They're calling this the Unite and Fight effort. And this is there are opportunities for non-medical technologies as well as medicals. And the big 4 lines of effort are relief of external assistance requirements, resilience for defense efforts, recovery in consolidating funding requests that minimize program impacts, and to be rapid, to rapidly acquire small business contracts. Another COVID-centric opportunity is the DAFT Act solicitation, which is focusing on combating the spread, the welfare of citizens, logistics, and industrial base impacts. Now, of course, they're also including medical, but this is not a topic that Eagle Point funding will work with, because if you missed what I'm going through in the beginning, Eagle Point is a segment of a larger grant writing organization called the Freemind Group, which does work with the life sciences. So if you have a life science technology, we're still happy to work with you, but it won't be directly through Eagle Point, the American Technological Branch. It will be through Freemind, the International Life Sciences Branch. Now, like the Department of Defense's SBIR, this has somewhat of an open topic addendum at the end that allows you to sort of pitch your technology that's not necessarily what they're asking for, but to show the government how your technology could be used to improve the lives of citizens at this time. Now, another program I mentioned was the Air Force. The Air Force has a special contracting agency within it called AFWERX, which is designed basically to onboard technology as fast as possible with as little bureaucracy and waiting as possible, and is designed specifically to bring your technology through the phases of development and into a follow-on business to government contract. So if you've heard of programs such as the Defense Innovation Unit or the Rapid Innovation Fund, AFWorks falls into that category of funding programs designed to rapidly onboard new technology. Now, AFWorks also maintains an open topic. Like I said, this means that you get to pitch your technology to the government with your idea for how you can improve the lives of civilians or soldiers, and they will decide if they want to work with you and fund your technology. Funding can come within 60 days and follows 2 tracks. So you can either follow a track 1, which is a standard SBIR track going through a 3-month phase 1, and then a phase 2 of typically around 6 months, and then this will lead to the follow-on contract with the government. However, if you already have a proof of concept and you already have an MOU or a memorandum of understanding, this is a document between you and an Air Force stakeholder, basically an individual or a unit that sees the value of your technology and sees how your technology could be applied to the lives of airmen. This memorandum of understanding says you'll go on to do certain research backed by the Air Force, and this allows you to go directly to the phase 2 and apply directly for $1.5 million, as opposed to applying for the phase 1 3 months before. Now, the pre-release for this program will be August 25th. It'll open September 23rd and close 30 days after that. In our past, working with AFWorks, in 2019, we made 10 submissions, 2 of which were direct to phase 2 and both won, and 6 were phase 1 submissions, and the other 8 were phase 1 submissions, 6 of which were won, giving us an 80% success rate with AFWorks. One of those companies went on to a follow-on contract with the government for drone-based data management software, and I believe they won a phase 2, a direct to phase 2 of $750,000. And another one was body sensing data analysis, or they're developing a body sensor. They also applied for a direct to phase 2 and won $750,000 and went on to get a follow-on contract with the government. Another opportunity for the third quarter is the Army Applications Lab. Currently, their areas of interest are autonomous automation, AI and machine learning, data visualization, synthetic environments and sensors, network communications, computation, space, and the Internet of Things. The National Science Foundation also has broad categories available across a number of tech sectors. Although this agency isn't so much into the business of contracting their clients and bringing on new technology, the funding opportunities for the National Science Foundation tend to be far more broad than they are in others, because they're really focused on the advancements of technology in our country, as opposed to the onboarding of technology. This deadline is June 4th, and the subsequent deadline after will be September 3rd for the 4th quarter. So at this point, I would like to open the floor for questions, and I will go ahead and mute my microphone and give you all time to think and reflect. And if you have a question, I'll unmute myself and go ahead and answer them. Thank you for your question, David. I'm going to go ahead and speak and answer and then type one so you can have the details sort of written out. So that's correct, an interface between the business and the government. And we handle everything from consulting with you to understand your technology to actually writing winning grants and applying to the government for them. The relationship can be indefinite, but we tend to negotiate contracts by quarter and work on a long enough time that you'll see a return on your investment. Because for a lot of businesses, the bottleneck is applying for grants, a lot of time and a lot of effort. And that's time and effort that your team could better spend in your company. So while a short contract will be less expensive, working, say, by one quarter to pursue one specific opportunity, the longer you work with us, the more we can repurpose that information and apply to multiple opportunities. Eagle Point really works by creating a multi-submission strategy because the grant writing is not a bottleneck for us. We can find every opportunity relative to your technology, bring you a strategy for applying to those grants subsequently over the determined period, and then make those applications and shoot for a strategy that will lead to a follow-on contract or whatever your goals are for your research and development. Now, we do require an upfront expense to cover the grant writing team. If you missed our first slide, we're actually part of a larger organization with over 100 grant writers on staff. So we do need to take an upfront just so we can fund that team as they're working. And at the end of the day, though, we win when you win. We won't work with companies if we don't think there's relevant opportunities, at least 3. And we won't work with you unless you're going to be happy with the submissions we're going to make for you. And that's all negotiated before assignment. Thanks, David. No problem. We can absolutely have a follow-up call. Here's the contact information for our Director of Business Development, Ari Farhan. He's happy to take any calls with you. And if you'd like to use that link right at the center of the screen, you can book a call with him at your convenience or shoot him an email. My email is the exact same thing, jacob@eaglepointfunding.com. But I'll make sure I send you all the slides as well as a copy of the recording. Zoom takes 24 hours to process the information so I can get the emails, but I will send the follow-ups to you all tomorrow. Thanks for participating, David.